Well, thank you guys for coming and, thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited to talk about this because I've been talking about my firm and my path and all of that for so long now. But this is talking about our work. And I think that's really exciting because it's been 10 years. And so, he leaves and I can't move forward or backwards.
I'll help you.
Either that or the page up, down. Does that work?
Mm-mm.
Huh, click, page down. That's so weird.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. We need like three people to, because it's our 10-year anniversary. So it's really exciting because as most of you know, I was at Lear's Wines Apple for 10 years, for 20 years. And, I started the firm 10 years ago. And even though I had a lot of experience for a long time, it takes time to get established and it takes time to get work done. And it takes time for that work to actually get built. So, I started the firm in 2013. It's been 10 years and we do a lot of, institutional, cultural, civic, and commercial work. And, I'm gonna talk today about 4 projects. A lot of our work, let me see if I can. A lot of our work is in collaboration. I would say about 60 or 70% of our work is in collaboration with other architecture firms. And I recently was at an interview where they asked me, when are you prime and when are you not prime? So I made sure that I put here, that we work as prime on some projects and we work as collaborators in other projects. And the reason for it is for capacity or for expertise. So for instance, for these projects, we just completed a house doctor. I mean, we have a house doctor contract with AMBA and with DCAM for master planning. And so we worked with Ayer St. Gross as our collaborating architect on the master plan for UMass Boston, which we just completed. And then with Anbeja Architects, now Annam, we're the prime architects and the collaborating architects for a cultural center for the Puerto Rican community in Boston. And with Era Street and Moody Nolan, we're part of a larger development team where we created an opportunity for a pavilion where we're design architect and prime architect. So, I've created this practice that not only do we do our own work, but all these collaborations are so much more meaningful for clients and for projects. And we also are collaborating architects on larger projects where the firm didn't have the capacity or the quals, even though I had the quals, to go after larger projects. And so with Handel, we're working on 2 Harbor, which is almost completed. With Sasaki, we worked 50-50 on the Mass Bay Health Science Building that I'm going to show you in a second. And with Studio G, we're collaborating architects on Ben Franklin Institute of Technology. I also wanted to show you what our firm looks like. We're 15 people. We're a diverse firm. We say creating innovative architectural solutions at every scale. We basically create opportunities for people, and there's some very talented people that normally wouldn't be able to grow in other firms, or they would be able to grow in other firms and they choose to come to our firm. And so we're super proud of, we're 66% women, 66% minorities. And we have, within this group, we have the president of Bosnoma, we have presidents and past presidents of NOMAS for their architecture schools, and people that are very involved in other groups that promote equity. And we also have clients where we advocate and they advocate for underrepresented communities, such as Ibram X. Kendi. We renovated space at BU for his research center. Mass Bay Community College, a lot of the community colleges, we're working at Massasoit Community College where you have a lot of underrepresented communities that work through here. And then, so that's important to us. We just started.
Hi.
Thanks. And it's supposed to be a conversation, so I feel like I'm like, so I wanted to talk about 4 projects, and part of it is for the collaboration, and part of it is for the equity of all of these projects and the environmental considerations that we've taken for each one. And one of them is this Mass Bay Community Health Science Building with Sasaki. We were the house doctor for Mass Bay. We did a study for this building so that they could get funding. They were able to get funding for the building, and I knew it was going out, and I reached out to Vinicius Gorgati that I had worked with 30 years ago as an intern, because I knew that they had done a health science building for another community college that was net zero. And I knew that they not only had worked for the Commonwealth, but that we could learn a lot from them for this type of building. And so we went after it and we got it. We were the first group for the, this partnership for DCAM through the State House that was promoting equity that was chosen for this. And so the client is super, works with students that are non-traditional. And most of them are working, most of them have dependents living with them, most of them are minorities, first generation, low income, diagnosed with a disability. So it felt like we had, within our two firms, we had enough diversity and equity to be able to touch on all of these things from the perspective, a first person perspective. We did a lot of utilization because this isn't a typical building. And one of the things, and Sasaki did the utilization, I want to say this, but we worked with them on it and all the programming. But it's atypical because people go to school, to the community colleges at night, early in the morning, on Saturdays. It's whenever they have time to be able to have their lives move forward in a way that is productive for them and that where they can learn. And one of the things that we were told at the beginning was that all of these students, we want to make sure that it's a low building because they have so many barriers. We don't want to create more barriers for them. We want to make it welcoming, inviting, and easy to learn. And so we had a design concept of these two wings. We had general classrooms, we had all the simulation labs, all the nursing. We had a success center, a library. And so we did, based on the site, we did two wings, one of health sciences and one that had more general classrooms. And then the other piece that these campuses don't have is student spaces, and they don't have collaborating spaces. So we created the student support space as a link between those two bars. And so we worked, a lot of our work was to create, again, spaces where community could be created. And this is just one of the corridors of the two wings. This is the lobby and the lounge. This is really their only student space. And it was really important, again, to be welcoming and to actually have space where they could be between classes and meet each other. And so the corridors were really important again, and wayfinding and visibility. And so this is the link between the two wings. And we have some photos that we took, or Sasaki actually took them. We haven't photographed it yet. It just got completed, but we're super proud that we were able to do this during COVID. And I think their enrollment has increased by 25% in the past couple of months, which is incredible. And we had an opening for the building that was really well received by everyone, and they're very, very happy. The students feel like they actually are in college. All the spaces are being well utilized, and there's flexibility in classroom spaces and general classrooms so that this could be, a campus out of the Wellesley, as a different campus from the Wellesley Hill campus. One of the things that I thought was really great was that we were able to do geothermal net zero building for this project, for a DCAM project during COVID when everything went up. And so it includes solar panels, it includes the geothermal. We have a solar array in the parking lot. It's triple glazing, sorry. We have, everything's all electric. So it's a really impressive building for a community that normally wouldn't be getting this type of a building. So we're very proud of that project. And it was a great collaboration with Sasaki. The second project that I want to talk about is creating opportunities. And this is the Seaport Circle development. And this was with Arrow Street and Moody Nolan. And we were a collaborating architect, was a friend of mine, and we talked about collaborating, and there was this competition with the developer for this site, which is parcel H and H1. And but it was really parcel H, and they were already collaborating with Moody Nolan, and they made a little bit of space for us. And really it was, it's a lab office building that has mixed use on the first floor, but there's also an MBTA station, and you could see it here. Number 6 is the MBTA station, the lab building. And then there was this really strange parcel called H1 that was an optional parcel. And we we're thinking about the fact that there are all these life science buildings going on in this area with no training for anyone who does not go to college, or no opportunities for people that live in the area, or live in a way that they can get to this site without the proper college university training. And so we part of the competition was this training pavilion, and we had to carve it out of whatever was left over. And I'll show you in a second, we had a lot of constraints. So the building can only be 2 stories because it can only be the weight of the soil that is already over I-90. And so we basically had to create a bridge over the tunnel, and we had to fill everything that is the grade full of foam so that it wouldn't have any weight on it. It actually was it connected to the main building with a pedestrian link at the second level. So we have 2 ground planes. And so basically we have, this is the building. We ended up being the design architect and the architect of record for the pavilion. And this is how it connects on the second level to the Aura, which is another parcel from the same developer. We had to make sure that the MBTA lines and any connection to Hall Road, which is vehicular, would be maintained. And we had to be very careful with anything that happened over the highway. And so these are the groups that were discussed, that they would become part of the collaborators, and they committed to it. And so again, these are for groups for adults to be trained in the space, and the program includes classrooms, it includes a lab space, and this is the second level, because on the first level it doesn't really have a front yard. The second plane is the front yard of the building. And we also, all of the materials that were used, and you can kind of see it on the first image that I showed. This is the pavilion as you go under the highway. We could only use certain materials that had enough weight, so we couldn't use any masonry. We had to use glass. We wanted it to be welcoming and open. We wanted people to see what was going on inside. And so you access it, you connect to the other building on the second level. You do connect on the first level, but you have to go through several streets to get to the building. But it was on the interior of the building, it wanted to be industrial. It's right next to the Marine Industrial Park. And we wanted to make sure, again, that it had light materials and that we could actually, that they were durable, because it's open to the public as well. And so this is the first level, and this is the lobby. And again, student spaces, we had to carve out a little bit of student space. Everything is 4 feet above also because of resiliency. And so we had to create a lobby that also has an elevator that's shared with the T. So I find that the projects that have the most constraints come up with the most creative solutions, really, because we had no choice, and we had to keep all of that off of the highway. So it all had to be at the entrance of the building. And at the second level, there's a community room that can be used by anyone, and can be rented out, or it's basically for the use of the community to bring them into the building to create opportunities. And this building also, it hasn't been built. It's been, CDs have been completed, but it's slated to be LEED Gold, but it just won an award for Fitwell. It was the best building for Fitwell 2-star this year, and it just won an award. And it's hopefully going into construction this year. So it's been a great partnership with Air Street and Moody Nolan, but we always have to create our own opportunities. And this was an opportunity that actually paid off to be able to get the project, and for us to be able to do something that we had really never done before. I don't know if people have questions. I'm just keep on going. And so some of the things that were important about this building, we couldn't do stormwater retention because we couldn't put any more weight on the tunnel. So it had kind of interesting challenges. It's solar ready. Everything's electric. We have, we have access to transit, the flood resiliency, all the low flow, low emitting materials. But there were things that we typically do on other projects or opportunities that we couldn't take because of the site and because of the program. The other building is platinum because it has all the stormwater. We couldn't add all the stormwater to ours.
How do you clean all the glass?
Well, we have the perimeter, you can do lifts on the glass, but we also have hooks on the top, to be able to clean the glass from above. So it all depends on how, we have both, but that was included because that puts pressure on the structure. So we have, we were able to include it. But we couldn't even do, the fins that we have around. They could only be a certain depth because of the weight. And so everything had to be, everything is designed to the weight. In the end, we couldn't do a green roof because of the weight of the green roof on it. So, it just, we were given the constraints and we were able to still figure out ways of doing it creatively.
Has that carried over into any other projects where you start to now think about the weight of your building?
It does, because this is a huge panic, right? Because the structural engineer is always panicked because of the, so we have found it in the next project that I'm gonna show it also, we have foundation constraints from an old church. And so, and in another project, we have foundations where there are two smaller buildings next to it and the cost doesn't allow for you to dig deeper. So I think now it's in the back of my mind always. There's certain things that like get stuck in your mind, like stairs, right? Like you want to make sure there's that extra tread so you don't have that weird condition. This is foundations now. We weren't traumatized by it, but we had never had to work so hard on a foundation, right, Susan? I mean, it was, a little overwhelming, to make sure that MassDOT felt comfortable that we're putting a two-story building over the tunnel. And what's really interesting is that we've been working at Two Harbor for years now with Handel. And there were proposals at one point of a pavilion over which is now a park. And they didn't feel, and BPDA didn't feel comfortable and MassDOT didn't feel comfortable because they would have to straddle it in a different way. So we've learned a lot about filings and trusses. And so it's been, I mean, I did a lot of MBTA work and I did a lot of infrastructure work at Lears Weinzapfel. And I know Jane really understood how to put together these very complex structural systems. And I worked on the vent building right here, which was slurry wall. So I've been really lucky. I've experienced a lot of different types of infrastructure buildings, but nothing like this. This is a tiny thing that is so complex. But really enjoyable. And so I think some of those challenges make for more interesting buildings.
How did you confront earthquake?
The seismic. I think they're moment connections that were the structural engineer. The team had structural engineer and a minority structural engineer. And so there's also a contractor and a minority contractor. So we had to divide up our drawings, split it up. And normally we would like go in, they didn't want to work with each other, like under each other. So we had to split it all up. So that was also the team, and I had never thought about it that way. Susan is the project manager on it and worked really closely with me on it. And Tan worked on it as well. But the dynamic of the team, having collaborators in the architecture and structural and MEP, was really, and the contractor, at the last minute, we had to divide up and create two completely different permit sets. Where does one begin? Where does one end? Is very complicated for this tiny 15,000 square foot building. Because for the large building, there were more opportunities. They could fit out the space. They could do because it was core shell. But for this one, we had to actually divide up exactly which piece of drywall it was owned by one contractor versus the other, right? What part of the wall. So, and Massport is the client, and they have been incredibly supportive. And one of the things that I do want to say is some clients don't do accountability for the architects or the teams, and Massport and DCAM have been incredibly supportive of it, which has really helped the relationship because it establishes already a system, the relationship amongst all of the team members. So that there's no question how the work is divided up and that everybody is treated fairly. So,
I'm curious for any or all of these projects, since we're on friends and this is conversations, what elements ended up on the cutting room floor for any or all of these that you wished had made it through?
for health science was the DCAM, it was right during, it was right during COVID, and the project budget came up higher, like everyone else's. And I was gonna go back on, in that case, we had to get rid of ceilings, which traumatized Tan. Cause he drew them. I can go show you. And some of those things, but in general, we were lucky enough that Mass Bay was able to do additional fundraising because they didn't want the building decimated because of things that we couldn't control. So we ended up, you can see here, in some of these cases, we didn't have ceilings in some areas, but it was okay. I was trying to see if there was, you can see right here where, but it became part of the architecture. So we found solutions for some of the things that we had to do. I think, I mean, in most cases, I don't know, Susan, do you remember anything else that we had to cut a lot of finishes but we were able to keep the ones that were important and really prioritize them. Do you remember anything else that we really had to cut? We had to do something with the, like, decrease glass. We had to do things like that and decrease the height of the building.
Right, and the glass was also related to performance and, I mean, I think that was a unique challenge here, right? Like, how do you meet the energy goals, have as energy efficient building and make great classroom and interior spaces? And I think the percentage is like, it's under 30%, right? Like 25% glazing.
Mm-hmm.
And the spaces I think are great.
Yeah, so we had to reduce some of these things, but in general, I think somehow the state and Mass Bay were able to reconcile some of the costs that we had no control over.
Right.
Because we had made the building so efficient, cost wise, that there wasn't that much to cut. And and some of these things were also the executive order 594 and that we had, and then the code changed. And so, it was beneficial to getting a really sustainable building for them. And for this one, there wasn't a lot of meat to the project as it was, because we were trying to make it part of the industrial park and more, have concrete floors and more industrial. But we needed acoustics, so we were able to get felt behind wood. So didn't have full wood panels, but that's really, and some steel, but that's really the only expensive part beyond some of the lab tables that we have in the project. The rest of it was pretty straightforward. The skin, we looked at putting metal panels, we explored metal panels, but the city did not want metal panels, because when we sold the project as a team to them, it was this kind of beacon, the training facility that was a beacon to the community, and having the panels on there made it opaque. And so we worked with a great envelope consultant on that, and we were able to transfer all of those panels to spandrel glass. And so we didn't really have much to cut, because most of the steel is exposed and the ceilings were, and again, everything had to be light. So,
Do you look at any non-glass transparent, either for white or for weight or white?
We did. And
Polycarbonate?
we did, we looked at polycarbonate, but the concern was the longevity of it. And it yellows. And we did look, there are some interesting buildings, like performing art buildings that were done in the Midwest that had this polycarbonate, and but they felt that it was not durable enough. It's a community building. They don't want to maintain it. And this project, the gift to the city is this project, and the city wanted to make sure that they that it would hold up. So we did look at it and we looked at metal panels, but it was, the directive from Massport and from BPDA that it be maintained. I don't know, Susan, if you can. So I think, they didn't want to decimate this tiny little building that could really make an impact. We looked also at, what's it called, the hall, the one by District Hall, yeah. We looked at District Hall also because they use metal panels, so that's when we were looking at metal panels. But they felt that it's such a tiny thing and that you have a glass building and then you're gonna make this shed next to it. That was not the intent. So, but we still, I mean, it's not built. It's, we submitted CDs last year. There's no, financing is still being figured out as most development work right now is. So we'll see what happens when it comes back, but I really don't know. It was approved, by BPDA and everything. I really don't know where would we be able to cut based on the requirements of all of the different entities that are part of this. But I'm sure there are places where we may be able to. So this was. oh. So I have two other projects. I'm just looking. Oh, I have time. That I thought would be really good to talk about because after we did those projects, one of the investors for the project called us up and said, we would like for you to work on a cultural center on Nubian Square. Because I have a lot of performing arts experience from my previous job, at Lear's. And we had been doing the last project I will show you, which is the Puerto Rican Cultural Center. So we're prime architects here. And I called Aisha Densmore Bay, who's a friend and an amazing architect who was doing her PhD at the time and has now completed it. Because I felt that even though the community is half Latinx and it is the nexus of Black culture in Boston, and that there needed to be representation. And since then, we have Black representation in our office, but we didn't, and I felt that it was unfair to be saying that we were so equitable and we don't have representation from everyone involved. I had, unbelievably so, I had done the B2, I was the project manager and the associate principal on the B2 police station in Nubian Square, about in 2011. So I had worked with that community, to start revitalizing it with one of the first projects for revitalization, and then the Bolin building went in and others. So one of the things that Aisha worked with us on, was looking at the history of Nubian Square, the demographics, and Nubian history, and then present Nubian Square. And so we started looking at all of the Nubian Square was a really, really interesting. It's the other downtown in the early 20th century. It's amazing people that came out of this besides Melnea Cass and Malcolm X, it's New Edition. There's also Donna Summers that's not here. There's Elma Lewis. And we started doing all of this research about the site and all of the things that have happened there. There used to be a theater on that site. And there also was the Elevated. Once the Elevated came down, it became completely depressed. And so where the elevated train was, the train station is now the Silver Line station. But it was just a really vibrant place. And before we came on the project, the client group, which included Richard Taylor and Kai, really call it Nubian Ascends because they wanted it to be about the future of Nubian Square and how it ascends into the next level. But they were really interested in the pyramids, in modern Nubia as well, in ancient and modern Nubia. And so the color, the texture, the triangles, the feel of Nubia, including the domes and the masonry and kind of the screening was really important to them. And they didn't want to lose that. There had been a proposal there previously, but they decided to go in a different direction, and that's when they hired us. And so then while we were working on the project, it became the Greater Roxbury Arts and Cultural Center that is now run by this amazing woman as executive director or president, just Tanisha Nash Laird. And they really the mission is to support and present innovative performing arts, cinema, visual art, and humanities that honor the cultural roots and diverse talent emergent from African diaspora while promoting social justice and economic development in the Nubian Square neighborhood. And so it's a destination for patrons, partners, performers. So it's not only about performance space, it's also about teaching, education, giving opportunity. And Tanisha had built and ran, I guess, the Newark Symphony and had success. And so the values that they created was community, creativity, social justice, economic development, and education. And so since she was hired almost a year ago, she has since put together a board of amazing people at a national level, very impressive, and they're doing fundraising for this. And that's Tanisha on the left and Richard and Kai, who are kind of spearheading this. They had this big welcoming for Tanisha at the Gardner Museum, where we've been trying to support fundraising initiatives. So we basically worked with them on the concept phase, and on the schematic design phase. And it's now into fundraising phase, and we will be working with them to try to help fundraise. I mean, some of these projects, the mission is so impressive and so important that they don't have that much trouble doing it, but fundraising as they would for some other projects. But it's a big endeavor, and it has to be done well. And investors have to feel comfortable that this is really moving in a responsible way. So this is the Nubian Ascends project in general. And Stantec is working on the large building, which was originally a lab, now it's lab office, and then the parking garage. We are working on the housing and for artists, and on the cultural hall, which is between two small buildings, which is another structural challenge. And then Stantec is also doing the loading dock, which is below it. And then number 6 is a future project that we're slated to do also, which are our artist working studios. But and then there's Artist Way, which is number 9, that creates a plaza for this entire complex. And there's an existing housing building right in the center between 8 and 6. So it's between Harrison and Washington Street. We're also, the FCIT, which is the Ben Franklin Institute, is right here on the corner that we've been working with Studio G. So it feels like we have this connection to all of these buildings that are really transforming Nubian Square. And again, Nubian Square was predominantly a Black community, but there's a significant amount of Dominicans and Latinx in the area as well. So it was a good fit for us, and to bring in Aisha to complement it was really strong. So we also had constraints for the site because there is the cemetery on the other side of the street. And so we couldn't put any shadows on the cemetery. So beyond the fact that we had these 2 buildings with really shallow historic foundations, we also needed to make sure that we didn't meet high rise. And so again, more constraints. And then the site was kind of a strange shape. We called that little piece the pork chop. And we're trying to figure out what to do with it. So we really, in order for this to move forward, it needed to be a working theater. And so one of the things that we had to do was, we have a couple more constraints, which is one is that there's a 9-foot elevation change from Washington to Eustis Street. Eustis Street, there's part of the land is leased, and that was another entrance where they were going to also be showing movies and using that as kind of a gallery into the space. We needed to make sure that we had a theater that could fit on the site with the loading dock, which is the most important part for anybody who runs a theater. And then that we had a lobby that connected 9 feet, from one side to the other, and that we had enough space upstairs to be able to have rehearsal rooms in a black box theater. And so the section, we put all of the support spaces on the lower level. We at one point had a balcony, the project. Now it does not have a balcony, but it holds I think it's 250 seats. I have to look again, but I think 250. We have a black box on the upper floor. On the second floor, we have rehearsal spaces. And we have lobby and gathering gallery spaces, connecting all of it. So the theater kind of set the space for this. And so we started looking at all the mechanicals, which can't go over a theater, and all of the components that were happening, including the two spaces next door. So we did a lot of studies of how do you create an engaging building, and then the use of public art. And so this is what it looks like today. And then this is what we're looking for it to be in the future, with the texture that was already as part of the Stantec building, this weaving of this African kind of textiles, and then utilizing the triangles from Nubia that was really important with the screening for the client, creating opportunities for art and making it as welcoming as possible. And so these are being used for fundraising, and then the interior, having the feel that it is about Nubia, about Africa, about a cultural hall that makes people from this community feel represented. And so these are for fundraising. We're still working with them and hope to go into design development later on this year. But it's a really exciting project, and this community would really transform with it. And then finally, IVA, this is La Casa, Center for Art, Self-Determination and Activism. This is where we're prime architects with collaborating architect Dan Beja Architects that is now ANM. And this is an important project for me because I'm Puerto Rican, and it's for the diaspora, which is what I am, the Puerto Rican diaspora in Boston. And so we did a lot of research, because putting a Puerto Rican diaspora building in the middle of the South End, which is a Victorian historic district, is not easy. And that's why Anne and I came together. Anne had been on the part of the Landmarks Commission and understood what the concerns were, and had done a lot of performing arts centers. We had done a lot of performing arts centers and cultural centers, and for us, this was really important. So she and I decided that we would go after it together, and we beat a lot of other architects, that including a Puerto Rican architect that we thought had a really good chance of getting it, but he was not from Boston, and we are. So anyway, we did a lot of work working with the community. The IBA started in 1968 when they were gentrifying this area, and they bought a significant amount of land. That they're both two women that run IBA, Vanessa Calderon Rosado and Mayra Negron Rocher, and so they are very dedicated to the lot of Puerto Rican architecture, for the colors, for the layer thresholds that they have, for the courtyards, for the solar screens. And so we wanted to be a building, a Puerto Rican building, but a building in Boston. And so it was a very controversial, because it was the site of this old church, historic church, that they had purchased 20 years ago, and it was the Victoria Center for the Arts. And so when they were renovating it about 5 years ago, they realized that it was structurally compromised, and they didn't know because they had never done testing of the structure. And so ISD required them to tear it down. So they were able to keep a lot of the historic windows and the granite and a couple of other things. But really, when we went after the project, this is what the site looked like. And it was really contentious in that environment. So as it is, IBA owns practically all of the buildings in this area. They have been they've been able to create affordable housing in this area for a long time. And so and then the O'Day Park, which is this park that is right here, is adjacent to it. So there was this benefit of this community building overlooking a park. When it was the church was looking onto West Newton Street. It was the kind of the side or back of it was facing the park. This was an opportunity to not only engage the community, but also engage the park and make it a bigger kind of a bigger connection, urban connection. And so this is the project. We have an L-shaped thing. So the program for the project, and you'll see it in a second, are offices for IBA, for resident services, for the youth art programs, but it's also this multicultural event space. And that is a 2-story space versus a 4-story for all the offices that is inside the site. And it relates to, all of the buildings that are of a smaller scale inside the site. Because that room, and the room was not only for performances and music and theater, but it was also for community events that would be held there, such as quinceañeros, weddings. And so, we had to have full flexibility. So what we did is we looked at maximizing the site. We looked at a strategy where there was program differentiation between the office space and then the lobby, the main multipurpose room that is next to the smaller, the smaller townhouses. The row houses right on West Newton Street are at the same level as the rest of the building. But we created, we articulated the volumes, we kind of pushed and pulled this so that we could get the right size and that it could be articulated in a way that was proportioned with the rest of the street. And then we looked at the public realm. And we looked at how the building would interface with the park, with the street, and how it would be welcoming and vibrant and active. And then we added a terracotta screen as a veil to be a representation of the Puerto Rican architecture, but in a way that was sensitive to the historic context of the South End. And so the program is the multipurpose room in the inside the block, or the interior part of the block. We have the lobby space on the first level, educational and youth and galleries on the second, and then office and administrative offices on the upper levels. And because of the double height space, we were able to create a terrace, a roof terrace, for another way of congregating. And here you can see the section of the project where we have, it's a 1-level multi-purpose room where we have telescoping seats so that we can create a theater. We have the terrace on the third level, and then we have office spaces overlooking the terrace and overlooking the city. And so this is an axonometric, and I'm gonna say Malvin did an amazing job representing some of these spaces, because we were trying to convey this not only for fundraising, but also just in general to represent the project and how important it is for the project to spill into the lobby, spill into the street, be part of the park. Out of this project came the renovation of the O'Day Park that KMDG is currently doing. And now it's oriented, everything is oriented towards the building. The building has 9-foot doors that face onto the park to kind of create a backdrop of a proscenium at the scale of the city. And so we did a lot of work to be able to talk to the city and to the Historic Commission and to the BPDA about the evolution of the facade, because it's a very different facade that they have in the South End. And to tell you the truth, when we started looking at new buildings in the South End, there aren't very many new buildings in the South End. Most of them are renovations. The ones that are there have not been built in a while. There is like the ink block and everything that happens nearby, but we really had to study the proportion of the upper, middle, and bottom, and with them extensively. And figuring out how to screen it. And so these are the elevations, and what turned to be the elevations. They were very concerned about the verticality of the windows, also mimicking the proportions of the windows in the South End. And so we had to do a lot of studies that related it to the context, and that so that there could be a comparison to do a modern building in such a historic area. And so this is the elevation at the front, with the lobby coming in, connecting to the park, opening up, and you kind of eroding the terracotta at the corner facing the park. And this is the view from the street as you come from Tremont Street, which is one of the main ways from public transportation. This is the view towards Tremont Street in the city. You can see the Prudential and the Hancock. And this is the area that has the multipurpose room that opens up onto the park, and the terrace above. So, and then we also had to study it at night, because the proportion of the windows needed to remain vertical at night as well as during the day. And so we had to really study how it would glow at night and how it would engage when it was open with the park. And, one challenge, there was a great opportunity for the park to be reinvented, but there's one tree that had to be maintained, and that was a challenge. And, so we did the best that we could and we negotiated and the tree is still there. And, but the container that's there is pushed back a little bit. And so we will see how that goes, but we did the best we could. And inside, again, it was very important to have parties, to have this lively space, to have a bar, to have, on the other side is the front desk for the upper levels but to have this area that would spill into all of the different spaces and thinking about circulation and thinking about also we're a loud culture and thinking about acoustics and thinking about how people move and how people stand in front of bars and queue and things that you might not think about for other buildings. And so, that was really important to them, and having the flexibility to be able to rent it because this is something that, that they couldn't do when it was with the church, the layout of the church wouldn't allow for it. So, and then how to become a theater venue and a music venue and so, and the acoustics, and we had amazing consultants on these projects. And so this is a view of it with the public art on the interior because landmarks doesn't allow us to have it on the street. To be able to reflect back towards San Juan Street and, Aguadilla Street to show how the building interacts with the park and interacts with the entire context. We have brick on the entire building and then the screen of the terracotta that goes around. And so that's under construction right now. It should open next fall, and so we're really excited about it. But again, tailoring these buildings to the community, having tons of community meetings, a lot of regulatory meetings, but really tailoring them because they're being designed by the communities that are invested in them. And so to me, that's one of the most rewarding. So these are the most, this is probably gonna be one of the most rewarding projects in the GRAC that I've ever done and that I will ever do because it's for my people. And so I never dreamt that I would be able to work on a project like this. So, I'm hoping that we're changing the game on some of these things and on the way that, not only the way that we do our work, but the way that our firm is composed and how we collaborate with others. And
Could you talk a little bit more? I realize you didn't design it, but the park and the amount of paving.
this is the old version of the park. So for some of these, we didn't know what the new version was, but then we were able to find it when we made the diagram, right, Melvin?
It's on the side.
This one. So that that's now focusing more, they're creating a plaza here. So they have this event called Tito Puente Series, where they basically have music outside, like live, it's a festival. And they need an area with an amphitheater to be able to have all of these summer. It starts in the spring, it just started, and it goes through the beginning of the fall. For them to be able to use it, they need it here. The rest of it is a playground and it's gardens. But there are also some basketball courts. So Park and Rec was very, very involved. We alerted them that this project was going on and we wanted them to work together. But they have their own strategy and their own mission, and it required a lot of work. Again, we couldn't remove the tree, which was very frustrating, but, because we're gonna plant 12 trees or 15 or whatever, but, you can't remove trees, of a certain caliber, to create an area that you could spill in and out of, right? But they still were super respectful of that, because that is where kind of the park and the building come together.
What phase is this one in now?
In construction, and the park is almost completed, right? Jose, I think, right? Or you-
Well, they're still in the process for that. We're mobilizing next week for our building on Eva, so we're gonna see what we should be interesting, sandlot, as they say. Make sure that, we're not getting in their way and vice versa.
So this was a great collaboration with KMDG that we worked with on other projects, and they were very respectful, but they also had the pull of what the Parks and Rec department really is interested in, which is not maybe what EBA's interested in, even though they own every building around it. And so, and they have their mission and we respect it. So it was kind of coming into terms of where these two things came together.
The Union Square one is in schematic, you said, or just finished schematic?
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious then, because that one's still in process. What are you interested in exploring when it goes into DD?
So I think for that one, the challenge of that project will be not only the connection to the context, because it's so tight throughout the context, but it's really the facade, the envelope of the building because of all the constraints, but also all the public spaces. So you have this great, you have two lobbies that are 9 feet, at different heights, but that the building again doesn't have, it's right on the sidewalk on one side and has this small park of deeded land, in front. And so the connection of the exterior of the building with those public spaces on the first floor, because I feel like the theater, we found a way working with Next Stage Design that really is a functioning theater. So it's developing the theater as you would, but the representation of the community inside the theater, in the lobby spaces and outward facing will be really interesting. And again, the theater, we have theater experts that can maximize it, and it is what it is. But the representation towards the community, and then how the community feels to be welcome in the building. And the materials that we use and the spaces that we create are gonna be really important. And it's tight, it's super tight. We have to do, the crossover has to go in the basement level, because there's no room for a crossover on the site.
Since the nature of your relationships are different, whether you're the prime architect or associated architect, what is your discernment of picking a project, saying yes or saying no?
So that's a really good question. And I think it's evolving as we get larger and as we realize what works and what doesn't work. I'm interested in having a voice in projects that traditionally have not had equitable voices as part of it. I mean, again, I was at Lears Weinzapfel for 20 years and women-owned firm, and so there's a level of equity that already existed. But for example, we just won a courthouse as a collaborating architect, as urban designer and collaborating architect with William Ron Associates in Springfield. And the majority of the community in Springfield, in that area, is Puerto Rican and Latinx. And it's a huge courthouse. I worked on courthouses at Lears, I worked on many courthouses, but the communities that they served were, the Lawrence community was transitioning to becoming a full Latinx community, but it was also had the history of that area. This one, majority of the community is Latinx, and so it'll be interesting to see. So I decided to go after it because I felt that we could bring something to the table that would differentiate us from the rest of the team. And it was well received. And so I think I personally, when I first started the firm, had a lot of experience that as equitable firms or women and minority firms became more prevalent because municipalities and other clients were requiring it. No one was teaching me about that project type because I had already had experience in those project types, right? So it was a benefit for them to include us in the team and for us to be part of the team because we already knew how to work with a firm similar to the ones we were partnering with. But in every case, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. In every case, we've had to create opportunities for ourselves because the other firms don't really, some of them had never collaborated before, and some of them didn't know how to collaborate with us and weren't comfortable with it. So, we've been lucky to have really great partners that have allowed us to use our best skills. Moving forward, I'm wondering how that'll transition since we're getting more experience on our own as Prime and how people feel about the comfort of including us, knowing that we're doing the same work in parallel. But I think for me, since I only worked in very few firms before I started my firm, and I never even knew I was gonna start a firm, it has been a joy to work with so many people that I've respected for so many years that you can only understand how they work if you're a fly on the wall or if you're in the office. And so I always felt like, wow, it's like I never dated that much before I went to here. And now I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of dating everyone and it's okay. Like, it's, I don't, but, I've learned so much from Anbeha. I've learned, and she has been so supportive and we have been so respectful. And of her, I think. We have learned so much about working with developers. I had never worked with a developer before. And what kind of a client the developer is and what they're looking for so that you can still try to do your best design work, knowing that they have all these challenges that are not typical of municipal clients. And so we've worked with municipal clients for a long time. One of the things that I did strategically was to become a house doctor for knowing that you can't just go get, you worked on a $50 million project, but no one's gonna give one to you if your firm hasn't done one, even if you've done one. So I started doing house doctor projects, and then I found opportunities to link in with Sasaki and say, look, we bring this to the table. So, I think every opportunity is different. Sometimes things are in our wheelhouse. Sometimes they're not, and we get to learn, and then we have to take a step back and be super respectful of the group that has a lot of experience, but that are bringing us in to learn. So I feel like it's evolving all the time. And some of them are better than others, and there has been one or two examples where they were not that respectful of us, and A, I won't work with them again, and B, I'm advocating for clients and municipalities to create accountability because sometimes we get used. And that is unfair, and I have a big enough voice, I feel like, in the Boston area and, the community to speak up for those that can't. So, I don't know if I answered your question, Emily, but.
You answered it the way you needed to answer. Doesn't matter.
Have you found when you're dealing with the community? I had this experience a couple times where over a certain period of time, the project has been designed for one type of community. And then over time, there's a new community.
Right.
And the project has been so specific to the community, it's no longer appropriate
Right.
as the community evolves. I wondered if you've had this experience or been at it long enough that your projects have had the experience.
So interesting that you asked because when I was at Lear's, we designed a building for Harvard that I just renovated 2 levels of for a different group. And we did a project for Tufts in 2018 that I just renovated another part for the diaspora, colonialism, and race group. And so I think I was taught to design municipal buildings that were flexible. And I find that they have been easier to renovate. I haven't renovated any of the courthouses, which are so specific because of the 3 different circulation patterns and stuff. But the community centers, the higher ed projects, and including this one that we just did with Sasaki, they're so flexible in reconfiguration that I think that's already ingrained in the way that we design. The communities have changed, but the buildings have been able to adapt, and I was taught that way, so I don't know any other way of designing, right? And I don't do retail or things that are quick, that change, right? As much. So everything that we do is durable and flexible. Not to say that everything's perfect, and there's some projects that are more specific than others, but I haven't had that problem yet, and I hope I don't, because I mean, if we want to be sustainable, we have to build buildings that last a long time and that can be adapted for others. And we experienced that at Tufts, where we renovated what was a historic museum that became a lab building, then now became a student center. So that's something that I never really knew. Once I started trying out different projects and working with firms that work with developers and doing things where the things that could be temporary in certain areas, I realized how much permanence the buildings that I had worked on previously have. So I was lucky that I worked, the type of work that I was doing before. And Doris, I want to say that I've seen you on every Boss Noma photo since. No, I have. So I do want to say that I remember when COVID was happening and the Me Too movement was happening and the Black Lives Matters shot up, which should have done it a long time ago, and people started like holding on to Noma because that was the cool thing to do and wanted to support them. And Doris, you were one of them, because I went to many Boss Noma meetings and you were always there. And I just saw, we have the president of Boss Noma in our firm, and I just saw that they went skiing, and then who we are, and Doris is right in the middle of every photo. You did not let go of them. You stayed on and supported them after the big push when everybody didn't participate as
I
much.
did not go skiing.
You didn't go skiing, but you're part of the group, and you're on their website, and
They're a good group. Yes, I have. Boston is unique. And I have some problems with the national organization. Definitely. But in Boston, contrary to what people might think of us, we're flexible, we're accepting, we like each other, and we like to be different, diverse, all work together. And that's a big plus. And we're respectful of each other.
and Emily is the greatest example of that. Emily, for those of you that don't know, Emily Grant-Steffresh, she was the AIA president this past year. And she focused the past 20 years on equity, creating the Guides for Equitable Practice with the AIA, and has been fighting for that for a long time.
Well, I have some good partners in crime, so thank you for that.
Yeah, but still, she's bringing it to the national level, right? And so there's something to be said about what you just said. There are a lot of people here that are interested in the right things, and
I think the AIA, for what it is, a good job. Sean.
It still has a long way to go.
Well, don't we all?
Well, I was struck by, communities adapt and these organizations adapt over time as well.
have you seen a lot of change now that you were there and that you can take a pause and look back? Did you see a lot of change happening this past year?
This past year, well, first off, it was a blur, like I'm still processing it. So that's a whole other conversation. I have seen change over the last 5 years, right? Because when I look back at the conversation of Me Too in 2018 and the many, many events, including the murder of George Floyd in 2020, I think there is a much higher awareness. And you said earlier, you know, communities are asking for WMBE. They are asking because there's an awareness that either they didn't feel comfortable about it, or they realize that the public is demanding this as well. And I think, you're privileged to live in a community that has these conversations. That's not happening everywhere in the country. You grew up in Florida. It's a different conversation there.
Yeah, Florida is a lot of different communities. That's why
Yes.
they're a really good litmus test for what the country is all about, because you drive, an hour and you have a completely different group of people. Or 30 minutes. I grew up in Miami, which is super cosmopolitan, but I went to school in Gainesville, which is like horse country. And, and the deep south, right? So,
I grew up in Missouri, and a lot of times I'll talk about how, part of what's ingrained in me is to play both sides. And that's not always the best strategy, but to understand how to operate on parallel paths to navigate that's.
yeah, I did also.
That's my legacy for better, for worse. And so I think we're really privileged. Boston is unique. We're having critical conversations. And it also says a lot, if I was an emerging architect 25 years ago, and I came to the BSA, I don't know if someone like you would be giving this presentation. I'm just gonna say that straight out. I mean, maybe it's
No.
yours, right?
That's so sure.
To Doris, I would be, but no, just kidding.
I 25 years ago. Oh, no. We were, the women of Boston have been going strong a long time. And 25 years ago, there were active exhibits and presentations about women,
Women, but not minorities. And I'll tell you, because at Lear's Wine Apple, I focused my first 20 years of my career championing for women, right? So I was one of the exhibit curators for women in design until the women didn't want to compete with other women. And then I created an exhibit highlighting all of the projects that were winning awards that were led by women, but no one ever said it. And so I did that exhibit, and then I just said, I'm not doing it anymore because women don't want to compete with women anymore. But I never, being a minority, I was a woman and I was taught how to be a woman in architecture by the best, right? And you're one of the best too, and Anne and Bay has one of the best, like, and Judy Nitch, like, they taught me how to be a woman in architecture, but they didn't teach me how to be a minority in architecture. And there were no minorities that I didn't have any sponsors that were Latinx women in Boston. If I were in Miami, maybe it would have been different. But even so, there aren't very many women leaders in Miami, right? I mean, I actually did what was called an externship. When I was at UVA, I went down to Miami and I did an externship with Andres Giovanni and Elizabeth Platter-Zyberg. But he was the Latin one and she was not. So she was, even though she was teaching at University of Miami and has won all these awards, she was kind of the second fiddle. And the same thing with Lorinda Spears and all, with Architectonica and all that stuff. So it was always second. So it wasn't until the reason I love Lear's Wine Apple. I still talk to them all the time. But part of the reason is that I felt like I needed to be authentic to myself and bring my culture into it and other people's cultures into it. And we had a lot of different cultures at Lear's, but they had to fight so hard to be women that we tried to almost erase it. We never talked about being women. It was never talked about. It was like, you're an architect and your gender does not matter. You do good work. We're going to teach you. My first project, you're going to be out there doing construction. And I remember going to Jane Wine's Apple and saying, I feel, it was a tea project. I was doing a tea station by myself. I was, I had someone who was guiding me, and I remember going to the site, it was all men and everything. And I just remember saying, I feel I feel like they're not Liz or whatever and Jane said, wait, they don't make you feel that way. You make yourself feel that way. You go out there and you tell them, they were taught that you had to be tough. And I'm so grateful for that because she was so right. I went in and I knew more than everyone in the room. And I was kind of uncomfortable because I was never put in that situation by myself. And I remember her saying, you don't have to answer anything. You just say, I need to go back to the office and take a look at it. This is before computer. And they made me strong. Like they were, I remember we went to interview for a project, I think it was at University of Cincinnati, and they had no clue they were women coming in. And I remember that they went in for the interview and they opened the door and they're like, you guys are women? And and they're like, really? And they got it. But they taught me how to be an architect and how you had to move gender out of the way. And then once I started becoming myself, I'm like, well, wait, I am a woman architect and I can push that out of the way because that doesn't matter. I can think that way. But I'm Puerto Rican and I need to be loud sometimes. And I need to wear, I'm wearing black right now, but I need to be myself and be authentic. And I don't know if I think I need to see what I can do on my own. And they were super respectful. And that's when they said, and Emily knows this because Emily and I have known each other for a long time. And so.
Do you think that, well, who knows, but 30 years from now, that minorities will be able to push that aside?
Well, that's the goal, is that then you can really be an architect and you can express yourself in your own way without having to explain to people why you're doing things. And I have to tell you, the bar at EBA was a prime example. They, some people wanted the bar in a special way, and I looked and I was like, wait a second, you don't know my people. You don't know. You can't put a bar in front of the entrance. If we put a bar in front of the entrance, no one's gonna be able to get into the building because they're all gonna stand there talking. I just, and then I walked in when I told the two women, Puerto Rican, they're like, oh my God, you're totally right. But it was something that didn't cross, it made total sense the way it was for a generic building, but not for, I could just see
Doesn't make any sense.
No, but it could have worked for other groups that are more organized and more, and
Yeah, boss.
That have different patterns of.
that have different patterns of socializing. This would have been chaotic. And it was something that, that's just one example, but it was a way of thinking of it for the people that are going to use it. And there are many people that are going to use it, but every voice counts. And if the majority of the people that are going to use it are going to make a mess out of the current design, we have to pivot to make sure that we allow for flexibility for the design to allow, as the neighborhood changes, to allow for a lot of different people to use it in different ways.
My wish in 30 years is not that people need to put aside those identities because the space is just created, but
normal.
it becomes that we each bring our own lived experience.
Yeah.
And there's going to be buildings where I will work with a community that is not my lived experience. And so being respectful,
All right.
right, and saying, I'm going to approach this with curiosity, and you don't build a building for the community without the community. And I think that is a sea change to, let's say the diet of architectural history that I was given in the 90s, which was about complete control, right? And I really love the era that we're in now, where we get to express things in ways where we're co-creating spaces.
Yeah, but there is a line where the community is not licensed architects. And that obviously one needs to communicate with them, and get all their opinions. And then synthesize those, makes sense.
Yes. Okay.
A friend of mine sent me all these articles. She sent me this article about a $9 million house, if you could, up on the North Shore. And this is a long article about, people, clients, they have these strong ideals and they found the architect who would work with them and be supportive to all these strong ideas. See, look at this photograph. Yeah, that's the biggest hodgepodge of ideas. So at some point, you have to say, well, that's great.
But you have to use your expertise to make it into buildings
Right,
But-
and to guide.
and to guide them. Well, it's not guidance. We're not saying we want the community to design a building. We're saying we want to work with the community to use our expertise to give to design a building that works for everyone, especially the people that will use it. But I have to say, it is in it's my responsibility where I am to empower others that normally wouldn't be empowered, and we're still not beyond that. And so to me, that's really important. For example, we're looking for someone that will sell us furniture for this project, and the client has asked me to look for a group that has Latinx people. And if they don't have Latinx people, they need to partner with Latinx people because they don't want it, the people that are working. No, we have Latinx people. They're the ones that are cleaning the tables, right? So it's really hard to find and create these opportunities. And I think that, to me, not only by creating the firm and building it based on a diverse group of super talented voices, but also in every aspect of the project, for the EVA project, it's creating opportunities, and we're still at that stage, the same way that we created opportunities for women, and we still have to create them because a lot of people, for a while there were presidents of companies that were women that were really not making the decisions or even ownership. And now I think that's starting to change somewhat, but we don't want to lose momentum on that. We just want to, we want people to have responsibility.
Hopefully, with this furniture and stuff, the people working on the line in the factory are Latinx and getting.
Right, but we want the people that are making the deals and getting the commission to be Latinx because they're capable. Yeah, we don't want the people in.
I think
Not
also
just
into
the
your,
owner.
like what you did at Union Square, I think the message there is that making sure that there are members of the community who are also on the professional side, right? So that if there are not members of the team who are a part of the community, then it's the wrong team.
Correct.
Yeah, supplement the
And-
team, find members of the team who do have the professional skills, who are also members of the community.
Who don't necessarily get the opportunity to work on a project like this because they don't have any experience with theater. That's it. But that can contribute in different ways. And now they were hired to create wayfinding and graphics for the project as well. And so, anyway, it's
So I'm curious then, that you were talking about how gender was pushed aside 25 years ago. And in starting your own firm, you've been working to bring your culture to your practice. Do you find that you are also able to bring your gender to your practice in a way that you had to push it aside before?
when I'm saying push it aside, it's that we didn't talk about it.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, there was pressure.
I don't
to-
think I talk about, I don't, okay, both of you. Do I talk about culture and gender in the office?
Not really.
We don't talk about it because it's normal.
Yeah.
So I think what I want to get to is that people contribute because they all have different skills. But I'm not gonna say, I mean, we have very limited amount of African American architects, right? So we do have an African American architect who will work on the African American project because that makes sense, right? In that case. But I mean, everyone else that works on the project is diverse, right? And in thinking and in generation and in everything else. I guess I don't wanna, I wanna celebrate
Yeah,
being a
I guess-
woman and so
Yeah,
that,
what I'm, yeah, and I think what I heard you say, and I've certainly heard others say, is that for a long time, whether it's gender or culture, there's been pressure to assimilate, code switch, act more,
Yes.
act more white. And
don't look feminine.
yeah, and in hearing you speak, it sounds like you are really able to.
I
not
feel
do that.
liberated.
Yeah.
That's how I
leverage-
feel.
You talked a lot, I guess, about leveraging your culture to be yourself, to not assimilate. But you didn't speak as much.
About being a woman,
About being a woman and about not,
because,
not assimilating a gender.
because I was empowered to not care that I'm a woman. I don't know if that makes, but
The other side is making other people feel comfortable. I don't want to be in your face about who I am and make you feel uncomfortable.
right.
So maybe it's called assimilation, but maybe it's called politeness and consideration. So that
Well,
we can all feel comfortable together and you don't feel uncomfortable. And I don't put myself forward to make you feel comfortable.
but Doris, the
Some
thing is,
people
we were
do.
taught to do that, right? If you're acting, you're basically everywhere you go. But there is a release of being yourself. And I have to say, I remember Jane Andrews saying a scarf is the tie, woman's tie, right? I had to look almost like,
Yeah.
you know, the only person that I saw that looked, that to me felt more authentic, but that's because I think that was just the way she grew up also, was Anne Beha. I felt like she didn't wear black all the time. She kind of, you know, she was more, and Judy Nitch, I think, also.
This is an interesting conversation because it goes to, I think, one of those unsaid nuances of male architects or traditionally male architects or identifying as male architects versus female. When I was at the AIA last year, I always had to coordinate what I was wearing with Kimberly Dowdell and Lakeisha Woods. Because there have been times where we would show up at an event literally wearing the same dress. And half of our texts are, what is your plan for the next 3 days? And we would coordinate colors. Now, men probably have to do that sometimes in interviews when they're coordinating their ties, because they might show up wearing the same tie.
They don't even wear
That's a little
ties
awkward,
anymore, so,
right?
yeah.
But I think there is part of our presentation, for better or for worse, over the years has been, you know, are you drawing attention to yourself? Are you not drawing attention to yourself? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? And it's at a different scale. And I think that's just women, professional women in general, but also within architecture. You know, do you wear black? Do you wear too much black? You know, what's the height of the shoe, et cetera, et cetera. It comes with the territory.
There's another layer there that,
Oh,
that,
yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, and of course, like, then I, in retrospect, I take a step back and go, oh my God, I can't believe I talked to, close in Natasha's presentation. But I think there's subtlety to it, that part of it you learn through assimilation with others. That if you don't have that relationship with a mentor that's, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you, you kind of have to
lost.
you're lost, or you have to figure it out some other way. And then if we layer on the intersectionality of what if you are transgender, or what if you, right, there's a lot to what it means to identity. And again, I think we live in a really cool time where we're talking about some of
we're
this stuff,
really talking about,
right?
yeah.
And I love the scarf is the necktie, because yes,
Yes.
My neck is so, let me just point out, there are 4 women in this room.
There are three women. There are three women.
Sleeves
Doris,
and high necks on,
three women.
and we all are dressed in a certain way because we are professional. And we deal with contractors who are, have a certain mindset at times, so they're better now.
Yeah, it's
Very kind.
so that's just sort of part of the, like,
But
what goes into it. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, when I was running for election at AIA, like, I never went out and said, you should elect me because I'm female.
No.
All I would do, the one time that I was running against all male candidates, I wore the brightest dress possible.
Right.
So that they did.
then you're differentiating
I was
yourself,
differentiating
Yeah.
myself in a different way,
but you knew that it wouldn't hurt you.
right.
But before that, it might have. So you might have worn the scarf.
Yeah, but I think,
But I mean, I wear scarves all the time. It's not, but I mean, I just remember, but I do want to say.
Special. It's cost me a fortune.
Yes. But I do want to say, my liberation of my authenticity came from teaching. Because I was teaching at Northeastern,
Mm.
where the whole demographic was so different and so international and so different than when I went to school. And that I could connect with them a different way, that I actually, and I kind of felt a little bit, I mean, I had been a TA and I had taught a little bit, but I hadn't really taught enough to be teaching all these classes that I was thrown into. And I kind of felt a little, even though I knew what I was teaching, a little bit of an imposter syndrome. And that helped me like free myself. Like, I'm not going to teach like I was taught. I'm not going to teach like anybody else in this place is teaching. I'm going to teach in a way that I'm connecting with these people who are from all over the world, who don't understand what I'm saying if I say it in the way that I'm saying it or reading the book, but I will do it in my own way. And I felt completely liberated to be who I was. I was telling anecdotes about situations that I was teaching tectonics about what had happened to me at a site and why that was important to learn and why blah, blah, blah. And it was a really dry subject and I got a really great feedback. And then I taught a comp class, a design class, and they gave me the most diverse group by chance. I don't know how, and they were all the master students versus some of the that had come from different places. And I learned so much. And they actually contact me all the time. And and they will, like, someone just applied to Princeton for grad school and just called me up and said, remember that class? Can you send me the syllabus of blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, and that's how photo, I'm like, I do remember. Like, what did your project look like? What did you, but I just saw, you know, I connected with them in a way that was very different than the way that I was connected with and that others were connecting, because you just kind of follow the rules sometimes because that's what we all do. And I came in with no preconceptions and I just turned the place upside, you know, the class upside down, and it made an impact on them and it made an impact on me. And I was like, wait a second, they respect me for who I am. I don't have to talk in this architect lingo. I don't have to dress a certain way, and I don't have to pretend that I'm someone that I'm not. I can actually be authentic with them. And that's, to tell you the truth, and that happened the first year that I started the firm that I went to teach, because I wanted to try all different things. And that liberated me. And then I was like, I'm not finding success with who I am. If I'm finding more success with being who I am than I am with trying to be what people expect me to be, because that's the norm. And I have to tell you, I've been working with some firms where people were very ingrained in that way of teaching and speaking and doing all that stuff. And I'm noticing that they are finding themselves in the minority now, and that they are really seeing the benefits of working with us, because they understand now the value of it. It's not just that the clients aren't going to hire them unless we're with them, but it's just also that if we speak in a different way, we're more authentic in the way that we speak and the way that we design, and super respectful. So I don't know. I felt when I left Lears, I was a little nervous. I mean, I was at a great place. I was like, would I be able to do this? But I was able to transform it into something different. So it's not that I'm not doing what I would have done there. It's just that I twisted it to be able to really understand what was important to me in my own way. And
Imagine your staff benefits from that.
I don't know, what do you,
Yeah.
Put 'em on the
Yeah, we
spot
do.
there.
Like the expression of oneself authentically is like all I ever want in a relationship with anybody, whether it's a business transaction, a professional transaction. And being able to express yourself authentically and in the multiple identities any one person might have, I think has consequences for things beyond ourselves, like the structured practice, right? How you make decisions, how those conversations happen,
Mhm.
what the building ends up manifesting as a result of all.
and teams, how do teams work? So
Totally.
there's a flexibility of teams. And it's not just like, okay, these people don't have anything to do. It's like, everybody knows everything that's happening. And we have a lot of communication, don't you think? So
Yeah.
people can jump on projects and they already know the project. And they all help each other. So there's no, I feel like, I don't know, maybe you feel it, but I don't feel like there's no competition. It's more like we're just a big family working together.
Yeah, absolutely. I always feel like we're in a big family. The thing that I really feel in working the firm is that democracy. Everyone has a voice and we are not afraid to voice the design thinking and I love every charrette design that we sit down and we talk about the project and we contribute our ideas together. So it's great.
And one of the things that I think, and I know you're probably,
I have an early flight
yeah,
tomorrow.
and
But it's-
I know, good to see you too. But just in closing, one of the things that I think is really important also for people where English is not their first language, to empower them to speak in public and to be part of the team. And we've done that with Tan. So Malvin just started because his professor said, I think this firm would be a really good fit for you. And she's Puerto Rican and she connected us but Tan, he was afraid of speaking because it's not his first language. And we made sure that we made him very visible. And then he didn't show up to one meeting and the client got mad at us. They're like, where's my man Tan? I was like, Tan, you need to come to the next meeting. So empowering them for people to meet people that they normally wouldn't be allowed to connect with for different reasons, I think is also really important.
Yeah.
Thank you.